everywhere, but we did a mentor lunch and had to scream over everybody. Can we move those lights maybe a little bit? Or maybe not. We don't have to stand here. Okay, well, first let me tell you a minute about Carr and Ferrell. Since we are thrilled to be today's premier sponsor, because I turned around, I've been practicing for more than 25 years. I turned around 5 years ago and I said, where are all the women? 90% of my clients are men. 99% of the senior lawyers I negotiate against are men. So in the last 5 years, we've made a big push to try and pull more women along into the entrepreneurial ranks. So welcome, and if you want more information about the firm, we've got a table, we've got a founder mentor program to help make legal fees much easier for everybody to swallow. First, I'd like to introduce Susan Mason, who, among other things, is a co-founder and general partner of Aligned Partners. Susan, why don't you tell the audience a bit about your background? There should be a mic there.
How's that? Is that better? Yes. Background, let's see. Quick.
Just quick. I know you've had a ton of experience.
BSEE,
Thank you.
CS, designed to get microprocessors, beginning, then ran operations for large corporations. I had my own company for 7 years, and then for the last 17 years I've been doing venture investing at a larger fund before I started my own fund called Aligned Partners.
Jana Trantow is an associate at BlueRun Ventures.
So thanks again for you guys for coming on Saturday and thank you for inviting us. A little background on me. I'm an entrepreneur and investor. I just joined the team at BlueRun Ventures for another class. Prior to that, I was at PBWorks in New York, building very social consumer products there, and had a little long run of consumer mobile products. At BlueRun, we, of course, focus on consumer products, so it's a good fit.
And Chris Ye, VP Marketing of PBWorks.
Hi, just wanted to, wow, this was loud. So just to confirm, I'm not actually a woman, but I'm very glad and very proud to have been invited to be on this panel. I think it's because I've invested in a number of women-led startups over the years, and so they figure I maybe know something. I've been doing angel investing since around 2006 and have invested in, advised, or founded somewhere around 100 companies. It's a large number, and I try not to remember exactly how old I am. But I'm really glad to be here today, really enjoying the day, and really looking forward to the panel.
Great. I've noticed these three investors all have experience in industry, startups, industry, so they've seen it from both sides, and I think they're a great wealth of information. So what we're going to talk about today really are the decision points for investors. What do investors want to see? What do you need to show them? And in addition to talking about specific business matters, to the extent we can weave in what makes for a financeable entrepreneur, because we have financeable business plans, but we also have financeable entrepreneurs. So if I can start by saying, what's the first threshold matter you need to see to start your interest in a company? You probably get a lot of business plans submitted to you, and there's some on-off switch. So what's the on switch?
Okay, so I'll start. We compiled numbers recently for our investor committee meeting, just to give an update to our own limited investors in our fund. And so in the last 15 months, we had over 1,600 clients come in to us, either typically mostly by referral. Of those, we looked at about 385, of those we invested in 4. So it is a very narrow filter that you have to get through with venture capital investing. Is that better? I'll speak up more. So there are 3 key elements that we look for. One is market opportunity. The second one is the quality level of the team. The third one is the quality level of the technology. And so our particular fund invests in enterprise-focused tech companies. So the one thing that I want to get across is each venture fund has its own business model. So there isn't a generic investment model for a venture fund. So this is part of the aspect of you being very clear and understanding who it is on the other side of the table that you're pitching to, so that you understand what's their business model, what are they looking for in specific. So you have some consumer here, And we're just enterprise focused, just to give you a feel. So those three key elements are what we're looking for.
I think that's a good point too, to know who's on the other side of the table. We all, I think, represent three very different parts of businesses. We are very consumer focused at BlueRun. There's things that are really important on the consumer side. For us, if we're intrigued, so first we have to be intrigued with the company, but the two things right away is there a market and is the market ready? I like to kind of go back to one of our portfolio companies, Waze, that exited. Waze was funded in 2008 when it was forward thinking to think that everyone had GPS in their hand. And at that time we realized that yes, there's a market for it and the market is ready and it's early. So that's kind of our first pass at that, and then we have all of the other things. I think we'll get into what we look in the founders in a minute, but there's a lot more, but I kind of need those two first things to make sure to keep going.
And I will not try to add too much to it. I'll just say that one of the great stories I always love telling about venture capital is that a researcher in Silicon Valley went to talk to three legends of venture capital. One was Bill Draper, one was Dick Cramlick from NEA, and the third was, who was the third? Yes, exactly, Don Mountain. You know the story.
I saw that show.
So the story goes, the researcher went to ask each of them why they invested in a company. And he asked Don Valentine, said, it's all about having a fantastic market. You have a fantastic market, you can build $1 billion company. They went to Bill Draper and they said, Bill, what's important? What do you look for? He said, it's all about having fantastic technology. You have fantastic technology, you build $1 billion company. And they finally went to Dick Cramlick and said, well, what do you look for? And he said, it's all about fantastic people. You have fantastic people, you can build $1 billion company. Now these are three legends of venture capital who have funded, the Cisco's of the world, and all these companies have been enormously successful, by the way, a female-led company. And what you basically take away from it is that there's those three axes. And every firm may be a little different in terms of which of those axes they emphasize. And one of the things you can do is to research the firms and research the investors and say, what do they say is most important? Alternately, you could be Sheryl Sandberg tackling a market that everyone in the world needs with a technology that actually produces anti-gravity. So that's also the other option.
Well, each of you mentioned market when you described what you were looking for. Can you explain that a little bit more? Is it the size of market, the product market? Is a niche market better? Is wide market better? Jana, why don't you start?
I'll start and do a really precise answer saying it depends. So I can kind of give some anecdotes of something I've been looking at very closely recently is around beacons and sensors. There are a lot of companies going after this. And what I've been frustrated and excited about, there's kind of two pieces of there is a market there. There's something going there, but it is so early that the market's not ready. And so it's frustrating to see these really hardworking entrepreneurs addressing something when we talk about beacons, it's more in the retail space, but their customers and their users aren't quite ready. Customers being retails like Target, where they're testing, everyone's in this testing mode, but not knowing how to apply or what applications to put to that technology, as well as the users being all of us, how are we going to consume that, and that's not really ready either. So super excited about the technology, super excited where it's going. I'm just kind of frustrated about not everyone's ready yet.
One of the other things I like to think about markets, and by the way, I have a company that I seed funded that is going to be in that space and is going to be ready for a Series A and did almost $6 million in revenue last year. So we'll talk after this. In terms of markets, what I always like to tell people is, especially when you're on the enterprise side, a market means that you have identified a group of people with similar needs who you can reach through similar channels. Like marketing, and I come up from a marketing background, marketing only works if there are actual channels to reach an actual audience of people that is significant. And so that's why you'll often hear investors talk about the importance of finding your niche or looking at a very specific group of people, because the whole point is, if you have to go meet each of them individually, that's not a market. You have to somehow be able to use the leverage point of influencers, of press, of distribution channels, etc. And so when I look at a market, I say, okay, are there a similar set of people who have a similar set of needs who could be reached by similar means?
Yeah, I think another good example of a market that everyone thought has been here several times is just mobile payments. We saw a number of companies get funded in the 90s thinking that mobile payments was going to take off, and what we discovered is the timing was wrong. Then we saw another group of companies get funded in the early 2000, kind of '01 to '05 timeframe. And again, it was kind of a false start because we got false signals in the marketplace. And now we've seen another ton of companies get funded. So there's a lot of blood on the floor in that category in general, and now the big guys are coming in that will do their own positioning. So, you know, one thing about the market is sometimes you get false signals early on, and so spending the time to vet those false signals to see if you really do have real market traction capability is important for you to spend your time doing the company that, you know, your time is the most precious element for each of you.
Do you look for a unique space when you invest? So while there are a lot of great original ideas, not every idea is original. Facebook wasn't the first in social media. Google was not the first search engine. Do you look for that first, or are you more inclined to get to that second? Chris, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I was actually talking about this with an entrepreneur yesterday who was doing something in the sort of meeting room space. And I was saying, well, what kind of competition do you have? Oh, there's this company and was funded with about $1 million from Baker Fisher, and there's this company that's been around for a little bit. They've raised $2 or $3 million. I said, okay, that's actually good. The fact that there is a market where a couple of people see there is an opportunity is a good sign. Because when there is a market that nobody has seen and nobody has invested, I would have to believe I'm smarter than everyone else. And I don't believe that. I get very nervous about that. On the other hand, you know, if a market has really, I think Google is a great example of somebody that defied the odds, right? Google went into a mature market that had a bunch of publicly traded competitors and said, we're going to build a better search engine. And they succeeded because everyone had forgotten that search was actually important. And they'd taken their eye off the ball and they were really focused on everything else. But in most cases, if you have a competitor who's raised $50 million, $100 million or is public, then it's going to be really difficult to catch up if you just have $50,000 from friends and family. So I think that some competition is good, overwhelming competition, generally not good.
Yeah, so this comes back to also the business model of the venture fund. So for our venture fund, we are focused on very capital efficient companies. So these are companies that will ultimately raise less than a total of $10 million in equity to reach their exit. And we like very focused markets. So, you know, our Bible is crossing the chasm. And because we believe that those focused markets allow you to get a dominant position within a category before you go to the next one and the next one, it inhibits, or at least makes you much stronger from a competitive standpoint versus traditional venture, which is horizontal, go after many markets because they can keep writing checks. So again, the business model of your investors is a key element of how you're going to get money and what kind of focus you're going to get on how you build out the company.
And I'll keep it short because there's some as well. Not to be too specific on what BlueRun Ventures does as well, but again, we all kind of focus on a different stage. We're strictly Series A, and by that, what we mean is more you had that early. I think it was a perfect example when you just mentioned that you actually have a VC company that has raised seed, so that's kind of like our first check that they have been able to raise some financing, as well as gotten some traction in the market. I think the word traction is overused. It's very specific to each fund as well what that means. But to us, that you've done some tests and variations in that seed stage, and you've done some tests, and then you're actually starting to see a slight product market fit when you get to our Series A. And that doesn't mean that you nailed it, it is ready to go, but you're far enough along in that to get that product market fit. And we don't actually need to see at our stage, it's something that we don't really specify. We'd rather see a lot of users that love the product than touching money yet, touching revenue. That will come, but I think finding that product market fit.
So this is an important point. I had a mentor lunch and someone, I think, mentioned that they have users, but nobody's paying yet. What does that mean to you as an investor?
Again, it depends. I think that's the good answer to all of this. But for us, it depends on who asked that question, what stage they're at. If they're going out for B, I would hope that somebody's ready to pay for that product, especially is it enterprise, is it consumer? Consumer is much harder to make a buck from. Consumer is very difficult. As an entrepreneur, twice over on consumer, it is hard. You know, very fickle. It's a hard business to run. So it just depends on, we have a few enterprise companies that, yes, we would like to see revenue at that time, but consumer, get some scale before.
So that would be in contrast to enterprise-focused funds, where we love money, and we love lots of money. That's even better. And we're pretty allergic to kind of activity without money associated with that activity, because we view that customers, because in the enterprise space it's an ROI type of sale process, it should be relatively easy to reach that cash quickly. And so we look for that validation point.
And I would just add that there's something I like to apply. I think other people probably come up with it. Larry Page calls it the toothpaste test, or the toothbrush test. And the idea is it something like a toothbrush that you use every day, hopefully more than once a day? And I think that a lot of the value comes out of that usage. So just to use two examples that you guys have probably heard of. WhatsApp sold to Facebook for $19 billion. And WhatsApp was essential to the people who were using WhatsApp. And WhatsApp had a very clever business model where basically it was free for the first year, and then after that it would cost you $1 a year. Now, if you're using something 50 times a day, are you not going to pay $1 a year? Of course you are. And Facebook correctly said, oh gosh, these guys are going to be drowning in cash soon, so we better buy them before somebody else does. Another company that you may have heard of recently is Slack, which has been enormously successful. And Slack is another thing where software development teams start using it, and they're using it 50 times a day, and they hook up all their integrations, and guess what? Even though they can use it for free, sooner or later they're going to pay. And so look at that intensity of usage. I will say intensity of usage really beats out breadth of usage.
And I have to talk about this because about a third of my law firm are patent attorneys. How significant is high technology, really cleverly engineered product? Does it matter at all? Do you look at it? Is it important as a barrier to entry?
So I would say that it depends on the firm. Like the kinds of investments I do at a seed stage, I love, some of them are really, like for example, I love backing teams which have a bunch of engineers working on cutting edge technology because, like, great, there's a moat there, there's an opportunity to do something innovative, that's fantastic. But, some of the most successful companies I've invested in didn't have that technology moat. They just managed to build a great product that people loved. So it really ultimately depends. I'd say that from the standpoint, it's obviously preferable to have strong intellectual property, but it is a nice to have, it is not a pure must have.
Just broke the heart of patent lawyers everywhere.
But you will eventually need patent lawyers, no matter what, if you're successful, because eventually you get successful enough, people are going to sue you, and you are going to have to lawyer up.
That's right. You don't get sued until you're worth suing.
You guys need lawyers. So Slack is another thing. It's something in both in consumer and enterprise, and actually that's what we really, really love. Winning the hearts and then like a Yammer style going in and then taking over the enterprise.
But still being used.
Yes, still being used and loved. But if you also look at Slack, it is a chat platform. It is HipChat. But there's something about it that people love more. So I wouldn't say it's high technology. There's things that they do to scale and make things really fast and wonderful, and integrations from Giphy to actually productive things in there. But I would not say that that is mind-bending technology there. But I love that company, and yeah, would love to be a part of it.
So I think on the enterprise space, we're not as allergic to patents. We like patents. The challenge, though, is that you're never going to win a market or win a competitive standoff using patents, because you'll be dead by the time that happens. So they're really trading cards for finding a big partner that you can trade patents with who's going to go after your competitor. And so we use them strategically when we know that there's a situation coming up. We'll find a nice big partner who likewise wants to protect that category and do a patent trade with some royalties and monies on the side. So there are ways to use patents effectively without having to take on that effort yourself initially.
Let's turn to talk about founders, since I think most of the audience here are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs. Tell me the profile of your perfect founder whose company you will fund, and is it one or multiple founders?
There's no perfect fit. I think that we like to see a supporting team of characters, but
And what are the roles of those individuals?
We'd like to see co-founders, but I have to tell you, the latest company we just funded is a single co-founder and had a really strong team that supported him like a co-founder would. So don't, I guess in your stage, I would never let anyone say, here are the rules. I need more than one founder, I need this, I need that, because it just doesn't fit everyone. If it's a single founder, but amazing technology, amazing team, and right fit and all market, all of that, it's fine.
I would say that the platonic ideal, I think everyone sort of understands this, is to have at least two founders, to have one be extremely strong on the technical side, preferably both, if you can have it, and another be very strong on the business side. I think the thing that a lot of people forget to get caught up in, oh, do they have the pedigree, because venture capitalists are really lazy, and they're just like, okay, two people out of Stanford from the CS department, great, give them some money. But, you know, the thing that I think that's really relevant that allows founders to stand out is, you know, what is your depth of knowledge in the space that you're going after? Right? I think that what people lose sight of is the fact that experience in a particular space, whether it be fashion or games or what have you, is enormously important because you are going to avoid the numerous mistakes that somebody who's new to the space is going to make. And you're going to have people you can draw on to get help as you're going to market. So I'd say go through the usual sorts of things, but definitely think about what is the expertise I have, what is the influence I have in this particular space.
I think the other nice thing about a co-founder is it's very lonely as an entrepreneur. You don't have anyone that you can talk about the good times and the bad times because it is constantly like this all day long. And so in some ways, it's an emotional help for a founder to not be singular, but to have someone else that's kind of there at the effort so that they can bounce off of each other and one's up, one's down, and they can help even out the ups and the downs, I think.
And it's important to note, I mean, your investors can be supportive, but at the end of the day, they're your investors. They're not your friends, they're not your co-founders. I mean, we seem like nice people, and we are nice people, genuinely so. But we have a fiduciary responsibility to either limited partners or to our families or spouses or what have you. And we're going to make decisions based on maximizing the returns we're going to get versus a friend, somebody who's a co-founder who's in it with you, who you can actually share everything with and say, okay, there's no conflict of interest here, we're totally aligned.
I just wanted to add kind of, there's no like perfect recipe for a founder, but one thing I find just really important, and we were talking to a group of about 20 really early stage entrepreneurs earlier this week, is something that you can't fake is thirst around that. So it kind of goes to knowing your market, knowing your product better than anyone. If your unfair advantage is because that you come from that background and you are so strong and out of the gate that you already are far ahead, there's a thirst there, and it's not something we can teach. It's something we know right away walking in and within a few minutes of talking to a founder. So I don't know if there's any gut check of like, is this, because when you're in it, you always feel like you have that thirst, but there is a difference, and that's kind of just like pretty important to us.
And we can tell if you just pulled together a bunch of trendy stuff and slapped it up on the thing and workshopped it and learned the right kind of pitches from watching Y Combinator demo day videos and what have you. I know, because that's how I raised money for my first startup.
I was going to say, I think we're both talking from experience here. I think when I first started my first company, it was. I Googled everything. I was so nervous to pitch. I was so nervous to do everything. So I was looking for this document that told me what to do. When I forgot about, I had expertise and I knew what I was doing. So I wish I would have gone back and done that a little differently and actually talked to that more than, okay, I needed to hit these 3 elevator points, and because we all have the same documents, you're all looking at the same thing.
We'll go for 5 more minutes and have about 10 minutes for questions. When an entrepreneur pitches, you know, you've gotten past the business plan, you said, yep, that looks like something we're interested in. What do you want out of a pitch that you haven't gotten out of reading the business plan?
Boy, there's a lot. It's the feel of the team we're looking at, the depth of the knowledge, the capability of maneuvering around the questions on the topics, and the business and the technology. It's the ability to say, I don't know, but here's how I go find out. And it's the coachability. When you reflect something back to them, how well do they come back with the responses. So you know, the initial executive summary, or if they wrote a business plan, that comes in first, and then we look at the presentation with them. And then we will spend a lot of time with them on working sessions, because what we're trying to do is stress them on different points to see how well and how fast they can respond on different elements around their business plan, because that's the way the market is. The market moves very quickly, and you have to be able to adjust quickly. And so we do a lot of those whiteboarding sessions as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of the same similar things. We, after the first pitch, or the first conversation with the founder and the team, we actually try to meet that team as quickly as possible. We go to the offices, we whiteboard session, we work out things, we theorize, if this happens with the market, or if this happens with your product, then what? We do a lot of that. We try to spend a lot of time. We kind of have this internal word. It's like, okay, go do the bear hug. Like, if we like a company, then it's like, spend as much time as possible. We're not trying to break you, but it's like something, we test the strength there.
And what I want to do is I want to dive deeper into a key word that Susan used, which is coachability. Coachability is so important. The problem is trying to understand what it means. It doesn't mean that you do what we tell you to do, because if a venture capitalist tells you to do something, they probably shouldn't be doing it. But if they do, and you do it, and then it doesn't work, if you come back to the venture capitalist and say, well, I did what you told me to do, the venture capitalist is going to say, well, you should have been smart enough to know I'm an idiot. Right? So coachability is a delicate art. It is the ability to really feel confident in your position, while at the same time being able to stress test that position with reality and evidence. It's the ability to listen very carefully and reflect back and make sure that we feel like you've heard us, but at the same time, very clearly say, I know what direction I want to take this in. And so it's like a classic stand-up comedy routine. You need somebody who is going to be confident yet humble. You're going to need somebody who's focused and yet open to new ideas. You're going to need somebody who is going to be able to do X and Y all at once. And that doesn't make it easy, but it does make it appealing.
I have a kind of question for you too as well. I feel like I can sense, and a lot of us can sense, the coachability within that first meeting when questions are produced rather than combative or anything like that. Like the coachability, I think you can sense really early.
So how long does this process take? I understand a pitch or an entrepreneur can fall out anywhere along this process, but say they're successful, they've found you, they've submitted their description of their business, you invited them in, you tested their coachability. How long is that process?
Yeah, so I think 3 to 6 months for us is pretty typical. We have had situations where we'll spend a year working with that entrepreneur just to see their traction points and how they're coming along. Because they might have been a little bit early for us, but we saw a lot of potential in what we were looking at. But usually for us, it's 3 to 6 months.
For us, it moves much faster, I think, because of the consumer side there. We generally say if we meet with them, we have an answer of moving forward, or by moving forward, meaning keep going within the week. And then I would say within a month or two, funded in our family.
So one of the interesting things is, because I'm not a traditional venture fund, I'm mainly investing my own money, what will happen is I'm really focused on the nature of the relationship with the entrepreneur. So the company I referred to a while back, I met the founders at a demo day, sort of a homemade demo day in essence. And they were doing something that I remembered one of my classmates back as an undergrad was interested in doing, but we didn't have the technology then. I was like, wow, what you guys do is really interesting. I want to stay in touch. And we stayed in touch, and maybe 6 months later, they're saying, hey, we're thinking about doing this, what do you think I should do? And, oh, well, maybe you should try this, maybe you should try this. And after another 6 months or so, they're like, hey, we've been asking you a lot of questions. Would you be an advisor to our company? I said, well, I've known you guys for a year now, so sure. And then maybe a year after that, they said, well, it's time for us to raise a seed round. I'm like, great, I'd love to invest. That's a relationship that built over the course of 2 years, because 2 guys from Santa Barbara happened to drive up to Mountain View for the Hacker Dojo's first startup demo day. And that's not necessarily uncommon. I think that the key is, I believe that it's important to meet smart and interesting people, and that you're never going to go wrong meeting smart and interesting people. And sometimes that means that you go through a process and actually be able to make a decision in a month, and other times it may be 2 years before that person even feels like they're ready to take money.
That's my absolute favorite, is when you build that relationship. I was actually talking to Sebby about it before we came up here. We don't have to be talking about money and your need for it on our first meeting. I mean, have a founder that we've known for over 2 years, and the product was right, and his timing was right, and all of his research, and he was ready. That's awesome, and that they're already family at that point.
Well, I know you often don't get an audience with 3 investors, so I'd like to open it up for questions.
Hi, so I recently worked for a company where someone more junior had brought in an investment contact. So they came in and we did the pitch for them, and they wrote back to her, and for some reason they didn't CC the CEO, but they CC'd me. I was the chief operating officer there, and they said, you know, can we have this information? And she really wanted to please everybody, and so she shot an email right back and said, absolutely, we'll get it to you on Monday. So we sent that to we CC'd the CEO, and then the CEO immediately got us on the phone and said, you know, you always have to trade something with a VC. You always have to, you can't just give information, they're just making you do work, and you always have to ask for something, right? So he gave us a list of conditions for like how much they would invest, and you know, the time frame, would they move fast if we got them this information, and he didn't let anything go. And it was kind of, it was very practical because we couldn't afford to take that time to do the work that they were doing, so it was a very smart move. But even putting that aside, it was kind of a posturing approach, and I was just wondering, what is your reaction to that from the investor side?
Did you get funded?
Well, yeah.
Oh, you did?
It was kind of follow-on funds, so we didn't need the money, but yeah.
So I guess I would have expected that at some point you guys would have known what their criteria was, investing, their size, et cetera, to have reached out originally to have approached them.
They reached out to us.
Oh, okay. So that's an appropriate question, is to figure out, are we within your target sweet spot or not? So I don't see that as a problem. I'm not keen on the quid pro quo kind of game that gets played. So we don't generally play that game, but certainly, you know, at the beginning of the relationship, we say, yeah, we invest 2 to 4 million, we like the company, this is how much we typically own of the company, this is kind of the process. That's pretty standard stuff from my standpoint.
I think you made the great point of there are some nutty investors out there, but for the most part are pretty great people, and I don't think that the back and forth of like, very, this is how it's done, and I'm you give me something back. Hopefully it was already an investment that you guys were interested in. I think the basic information is totally okay to ask for, but the formality of like give and take, that should be a natural flow.
And don't forget that as investors, we have a limited source of information on the company, and one of the key sources of information is the interactions with the company. And it's like, okay, so as I interact with the company, and they treat me in a certain way, how are they going to treat potential customers or employees that they're looking to hire or what have you? I'm looking for people with whom I enjoy interacting, because I'm going to assume that if I enjoy interacting with them, other people will enjoy interacting with them. If I don't enjoy the interaction, that's probably a very bad sign. That's not to say, I've heard stories about companies where the business model was so compelling and the traction was so compelling that despite the judgment of investors that the CEO was a jerk, they still invested in the company anyways, and oftentimes were enormously successful. But I tend to believe that life is too short, and I'd rather not work with those people.
Spent 5 to 7 years in our life with you, and I want to be able to hang on with you a lot, and yeah, set that distance early.
For Chris and for Chris, you are stressing more about like interaction with the one who is pitching for investment and all that thing.
So my question over here, that means what I'm assuming is that you are talking about the person whom your interest or who is talking about their pitching and all that thing. So you would take more interest to see what that person is capable of doing it. So you see the person in person over there rather than their idea and their investment or what their product is. Would you give preference to the person first and then their product and everything? Is that how it works?
So I would say that the person is the most important filter. And the reason is the history of startups that went straight from their original idea to massive success is an extremely small one, right? Instagram started off at bourbon, which was some sort of app for bars. Google originally almost went out of business because they couldn't even figure out how to make money. So companies are always going to run into things along the way. So the one thing you can really control is this a person that you enjoy working with? Is this a person that you're willing to bet on? And so that's why I think it's important to emphasize the person.
When you look at founding team structures, do you, in terms of equity, what type of equity structure do you think works best for teams?
Yeah, equity structure across teams depends. So I think from our perspective, because let me answer it from the broader model rather than our own, is that we tend to have more quality, I think, depending on, and that assumes, of course, equal contribution and time spent on getting things done. And so I don't generally see one person having 80% of the equity and the other two having 10 and 10. That's going to cause problems in the future. And if that is true, then maybe there's a problem with the fundamental founding of the company.
The way we invest as well, we have a very specific mathematical model that we do, and our founders, after taking our Series A money, still need to own the majority of the company. It's very, very important for us. And then how that is structured within that. Fair equity, I mean, again, it's glaring details like that. There's something further we can dug into.
And the important thing is a lot of founders end up just saying, oh, there's 3 of us, we split it evenly. And the question is, do those founders contribute equally? Are 2 of them working on the company full-time, taking no salary, and the 3rd person is working a job and is only doing nights and weekends? Is it the case that one of the founders happened to be a childhood friend, doesn't have any skills that are actually relevant to the organization? And what I warn entrepreneurs is I tell them up front, they're like, well, why do you care? Right? What does it matter to you? You just have your piece. And I said, well, you got to understand that over time, you guys are going to be working on this. And 6 months from now, if that person over there is not pulling their weight, you're going to be grinding your teeth saying, I can't believe I'm working this hard, and that person has the same amount of equity as I am, and I'm pouring my heart and soul into it. So like, I've seen this before. It can even be family members. So try to get it right the first time and make sure you have it in writing. The last thing I'll say is that I've sadly seen this happen too many times. How did you guys split up the equity? Oh, we just did 25% of each person. I see, okay. And how did you do this? Oh, we just gave everyone the stock. I'm like, no vesting schedule? Oh, no. Oh, dear God. So go find a good lawyer, and a good lawyer will help make sure that you're actually set up properly and stuff.
Yeah, we usually, I see the founders before they see the venture capitalists, usually, sometimes not. And I always take the founding team through a little sort of motherly discussion about this is the happiest time you're ever going to have with each other. And so just imagine 6 months from now you're doing all the work and your partner's sitting on the beach. How would you feel about that? So we try and, we try and stretch your imagination about the different possibilities and build the founding documents around taking all that into consideration. And it is not unusual, but it is not, I would say less than 80% of the time do all of the founders have exactly the same amount. And I encourage people to talk about your expectations in the company, your contribution, and that way the more you plan, first of all, the happier you will be later on. And if you plan well, including planning for vesting, investors will disturb that a lot less. If you come in with unbalanced founder ownership arrangement, or if you come in with something that the investors feel is quite unbalanced with respect to not only your relationship among yourselves, but between you as the group of founders and the company, they will want to change that. And it causes a lot of unnecessary tension at the financing stage. So get it right and think about it and talk to someone who knows how to do it.
I would even say, to add that too, when we look at an A, we have a lot of companies, and it's actually a lot of international companies that we see this most, is that even the equity structure within the existing investors prior to the A can be really uneven. And that's, remove all the roadblocks you can prior to. So if it's within the founding teams, if it's with early investors, if it's with an incubator you've worked with, that's what we see the most of, a huge portion of that going to incubator where founders aren't really close anymore. So.
And I would just add one final thing, which is that you want your cap table, your financing, all that stuff to be as vanilla as possible. There is no value to be gained by doing fancy arithmetic and things like that. The value is to be gained by being really awesome and building awesome products.
Yeah, I want to just throw I think I mentioned this to people on my mentor lunch. You don't want to distinguish your company by your capitalization table or your founding documents. You want your product and your service to distinguish you. Otherwise, you want to look like everybody else. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't having being in charge.
Hi. So that's loud. So I thank you guys for sharing everything that you have so far. I'm probably sure, that's a great way of saying it, that you've seen the study where they had blind pitches go with the same different people, or same people pitching the same, or different people pitching the same thing and getting different results, right? And so I'm wondering if, you all know the study I'm talking about, yes, you can talk about it much more clearly than I am right now for some reason. I'm wondering if you do anything personally to mitigate that unconscious bias and what you do, and anything you've heard other people do that seems to work.
You know, that's a really interesting question because venture capitalists are also looking for a style. It's hard to really describe it of what a Valley entrepreneur looks like and feels like and kind of the feel in the room. And so, at least my partner and I are finding we have to consciously step back from that and frankly, this is true for a lot of women pitching. They do not fit that Valley feel and the way that they present. And so we have to consciously step back and go, okay, let's take the veneer off and let's take a look at what the real content underneath this is, because we just don't have that sheen that is instantly recognizable in the Valley.
So I'll just state it explicitly. Venture capitalists, many venture capitalists are lemming-like, not the ones on this stage, but what do they see? They say, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for two guys in their 20s. They graduated from Stanford, the CS department. One of them's white, one of them's Asian. And then when I find, and they're both going to be pretty conceited, and then when I find them, I'm going to shove the money at them. It sounds horrible when you state it that way, but that's how it often plays out. And I think it's not because these venture capitalists are necessarily intending to be sexist and racist and everything else. It's because they've never thought about it explicitly, and so they fall back on who do I feel most comfortable with. And if you're a tall white man who went to Stanford and Harvard Business School, you're probably going to feel more comfortable with a certain type of person. In my own investing, one of the things I try to do is I try to understand that this notion of there being an it that people have, right? Oh, he has it, or she has it, is ultimately is not worth that much. I mean, there's some value to it. There's value to being able to sell ice cream to Eskimos or whatever the saying is. But I've learned to be skeptical of it because many people have told me that I have it, and I know exactly how valuable it's been to me, which is not nearly as valuable as other people think. So I often I've worked with entrepreneurs, for example, who are so engineering driven and so soft-spoken. The company I was telling earlier was saying, well, we know we can do this level in revenues next year, but we're going to take it down to this level because we don't want anyone to be disappointed. We'd like them to be happy when they invest in us and then we break through the numbers. I'm like, that's not really how people do it here, but hey, it's working for you, keep doing it. So I would say that investors tend not to be conscious of this. To some extent, the best thing that you can do is just focus on building a great business, because the one thing that always comes through are the numbers and the product and users that love it. Like, at the end of the day, all that stuff matters more than does he or she have it. Do I feel like they're a person who fits my culture or what have you?
I think I just got the hook, so one more comment.
I'll just do it quickly.
I've got the mic, so go ahead.
Let's do it on the flip side. So being a somewhat young female now investor, I see every single female that has a fashion, beauty, health startup. So I think that because of the network that I was in before and then in consumer, I think that on the flip of the entrepreneur, every female comes to me with that, which is great. I see it all. I love it. It's great. But I think that they're on the other side thinking what will I best identify with? And believe me, I still love that MIT grad, male and female, come talk to me.
Thank you all.